Having completed your aesthetic researches at Hollywood, what is your view of the film art now?
I made no researches at Hollywood, and was within the corporate bounds of the town, in fact, on only a few occasions, and then for only a few hours. I spent my time in Los Angeles, studying the Christian pathology of that great city. When not so engaged, I mainly devoted myself to quiet guzzling with Joe Hergesheimer, Jim Quirk, Johnny Hemphill, Jim Tully, Walter Wanger, and other such literati. For the rest, I visited friends in the adjacent deserts, some of them employed in the pictures and some not. They treated me with immense politeness. With murderers as thick in the town as evangelists, nothing would have been easier than to have had me killed, but they let me go.
Did any of them introduce you to the wild nightlife of the town?
The wildest nightlife I encountered was at Sister Amy McPherson's tabernacle. I saw no wildness among the movie folk. They seemed to me, in the main, to be very serious and even gloomy people. And no wonder, for they worked like Pullman porters or magazine editors. When they are engaged in posturing for a film and have finished their day's labor, they are far too tired for any recreation requiring stamina. I encountered but two authentic souses in 3 weeks. One was a cowboy and the other was an author. I heard of a lady getting tight at a party, but I was not present. The news was sensational in the town. Such are the sorrows of poor mummers. Their most banal peccadilloes are magnified into horrors. Regard the unfortunate chaplain. If he were a lime and cement dealer, his latest divorce case would not have got 2 lines in the newspapers. But, as it was, he was placarded all over the front pages because he had had a banal disagreement with one of his wives. The world hears of such wild, frenzied fellows as Tully and puts them down as typical of Hollywood. But Tully is not an actor. He eats actors. I saw him devour half a dozen of them on the half-shell in an hour. He wears a number 30 collar and has a colossal capacity for wine-bibbing. I had to call up my last reserves to keep up with him. But the typical actor is a slim and tender fellow. What would be a mere aperitif for Tully or me would put him under the table, yelling for his pastor.
So you caught no glimpses of immorality?
Immorality? Oh my God! Hollywood, despite the smell of patchouli and rattle of revolver fire, seemed to me to be one of the most respectable towns in America. Even Baltimore can't beat it. The notion that actors are immoral fellows is a delusion that comes down to us from Puritan days, just as the delusion that rum is a viper will go down to posterity from our days. There is no truth in it. The typical actor, at least in America, is the most upright of men. He always marries the girl. How many actors are bachelors? Not 1 in 1,000. The divorce rate is high among them simply because the marriage rate is so high. An actor, encountering a worthy girl, leaps from the couch to the altar almost as fast as a Baptist leaps from the altar to the couch. It is his incurable sentimentality that fetches him. If he was not a born romantic, he is not an actor. Worse, his profession supports his natural weakness. In plays and movies, he always marries the girl in the end, and so it seems to him to be the decent thing to do it in his private life. Actors always copy the doings of the characters they impersonate. No Oscar was needed to point out that nature always imitates art. I heard, of course, a great deal of gossip in Los Angeles, but all save a trivial part of it was excessively romantic. Nearly every great female star, it appeared, was desperately in love, either with her husband or with some pretty and well-heeled fellow, usually not an actor. And every male star was mooning over some coy and lovely miss. I heard more sweet love stories in 3 weeks than I had heard in New York in the previous 30 years. The whole place stank of orange blossoms. Is honest love conducive to vice? Then one may argue that it is conducive to delirium tremens to be a Presbyterian elder. One of the largest industries in Hollywood is that of the florists. Next comes that of the traffickers in wedding silver. One beautiful lady star told me that buying such presents cost her $11,000 last year.
But the tales go round. Is there no truth in them at all?
To the best of my knowledge and belief, none. They are believed because the great masses of the plain people, though they admire movie actors, also envy them, and hence hate them. It is the old human story. Why am I hated by theologians? It is because I am an almost unparalleled expert in all branches of theology. Whenever they tackle me, my superior knowledge and talent floor them. In precisely the same way, I hate such fellows as the movie Salvini, Jack Gilbert. Gilbert is an amiable and tactful young man, and treats me with the politeness properly due to my years and learning. But I heard in Culver City that no less than 2,000 head of women, many of them rich, were mashed on him. Well, I can recall but 15 or 20 women who have ever showed any sign of being flustered by me, and not one of them at a forced sale would have realized $200. Hence I hate Gilbert, and would rejoice unaffectedly to see him taken in some scandal that would stagger humanity. If he is accused of anything less than murdering his wife and 8 children, I shall be disappointed.
Then why do you speak for Mr. Chaplin?
Simply because he is not a handsome dog, as Gilbert is. The people who hate him do so because he is rich. It is the thought that his trouble will bust him that gives them delight. But I have no desire for money, and so his prosperity does not offend me. I always have too much money. It is easy to get in New York, provided one is not a professing Christian. Gilbert, I suppose, is rich too. He wears very natty clothes. But it is not his wealth that bothers me. It is those 2,000 head of women.
So, failing researches, you continue ignorant of the film art?
Ignorant? What a question! How could any man remain ignorant of the movies after 3 weeks in Los Angeles? As well continue ignorant of laparotomy after 3 weeks in a hospital sun parlor. No, I am full of information about them, some of it accurate, for I heard them talk day and night, and by people who actually knew something about them. There was but one refuge from that talk, and that was La Macpherson's Basilica. Moreover, I have hatched some ideas of my own.
As for example?
That the movie folks, insofar as they are sentient at all, are on the hooks of a distressing dilemma. They have built their business upon a foundation of morons, and now they are paying for it. They seem to be unable to make a presentable picture without pouring out tons of money, and when they have made it, they must either sell it to immense audiences of half-wits or go broke. There seems to be very little ingenuity and resourcefulness in them. They are apparently quite unable, despite their melodramatic announcements of salary cuts, to solve the problem of making movies cheaply and yet intelligently, so that civilized persons may visit the movie parlors without pain. But sooner or late, someone will have to solve it. Sooner or late, the movies will have to split into 2 halves. There will be movies for the present mob, and there will be movies for the relatively enlightened minority. The former will continue idiotic. The latter, if competent men to make them are unearthed, will show sense and beauty.
Have you caught the scent of any such men?
Not yet. There are some respectable craftsmen in Hollywood. I judge them by their talk. I have not seen many of their actual pictures. They tackle the problems of their business in a more or less sensible manner. They have learned a lot from the Germans. But I think it would be stretching a point to say that there are any artists among them, as yet. They are adept, but not inspired. The movies need a first-rate artist, a man of genuine competence and originality. If he is in Hollywood today, he is probably bootlegging, running a pants-pressing parlor, or grinding a camera crank. The movie magnates see him in literary directions. They pin their faith to novelists and playwrights. I presume to believe that this is bad medicine. The fact that a man can write a competent novel is absolutely no reason for assuming that he can write a competent film. The 2 things are as unlike as Pilsner and Coca-Cola. Even a sound dramatist is not necessarily a competent scenario writer. What the movies need is a school of authors who will forget all dialogue and description and try to set forth their ideas in terms of pure motion. It can be done, and it will be done. The German, Dr. Murnau, showed the way in certain scenes of The Last Laugh. But the American magnates continue to buy bad novels and worse plays, and then put overworked hacks to the sorry job of translating them into movies. It is like hiring men to translate college yells into riddles. Aeschylus himself would have been stumped by such a task.
When do you think the Shakespeare of the movies will appear, and where will he come from?
God knows. He may even be an American, as improbable as it may seem. One thing only I am sure of: he will not get much for his masterpieces. He will have to give them away, and the first manager who puts them on will lose money. The movies today are too rich to have any room for genuine artists. They produce a few passable craftsmen, but no artists. Can you imagine a Beethoven making $100,000 a year? If so, then you have a better imagination than Beethoven himself. No, the present movie folk, I fear, will never quite solve the problem save by some act of God. They are too much under the heel of the East Side guerrillas who own them. They think too much about money. They have allowed it to become too important to them and believe they couldn't get along without it. This is an unfortunate delusion. Money is important to mountebanks, but not to artists. The first really great movie, when it comes at last, will probably cost less than $5,000. A true artist is always a romantic. He doesn't ask what the job will pay, he asks if it will be interesting. In this way, all the loveliest treasures of the human race have been fashioned, by careless and perhaps somewhat foolish men. The late Johann Sebastian Bach, compared to a moving star with 9 automobiles, was simply a damned fool. But I cherish the feeling that a scientific inquiry would also develop other differences between them.
Are you against the star system?
I am neither for it nor against it. A star is simply a performer who pleases the generality of morons better than the average. Certainly I see no reason why such a performer should not be paid a larger salary than the average. The objection to swollen salaries should come from the stars themselves, that is, assuming them to be artists. The system diverts them from their proper business of trying to produce charming and amusing movies, and converts them into bogus society folk. What could be more ridiculous and pathetic? I go further. It is tragic. As I have said in another place, nothing is more tragic in this world than for otherwise worthy people to meanly admire and imitate mean things. One may have some respect for the movie lady who buys books and sets up as an intellectual, for it is a credible thing to want to be, or even simply to want to appear, well-informed and intelligent. But I can see nothing worthy in wanting to be mistaken for the president of a bank. Artists should sniff at such dull drudges, not imitate them. The movies will leap ahead the day some star in Hollywood organizes a string quartet and begins to study Mozart.